Let's quickly revise 10th standard ICSE Bio Chapter 4, Absorption by Roots. Roots absorb water and minerals from the soil for the plant. They have three characteristics which make them very efficient in absorption. First, they have a large surface area because of the enormous number of root hair that they have. The second special feature of a root hair cell is that the cell sap inside its vacuole is highly concentrated compared to the concentration of minerals outside in the soil. This enables osmosis. You see, osmosis is movement of solvent molecules, which is usually water, from a dilute solution to a concentrated solution via a semi-permeable membrane, which will be the cell membrane in this case. The pores are so small that only water molecules can pass through it, so it is a special type of diffusion wherein only water molecules move from its higher concentration to its lower concentration. The third feature about the root hair is that its cell wall is very thin, so there is practically zero hurdles in absorbing minerals and water. Now let's study some phenomena which takes place in plants for their daily activities. First of all, diffusion, which is useful in translocation of food and exchange of gases, but it is not involved in absorption by roots, so we shall not study this in detail. We just need to know that diffusion is the movement of any molecules from the concentrated solution, that is high concentration, to a dilute solution, that is low concentration. So if I spray a perfume in one corner of the room and you can immediately smell it in the other corner, that's diffusion. Next we have imbibition and osmosis, which play an important role in absorption of water. I just explained what is osmosis, which takes place in the root cells. Imbibition is also important, but it's a surface phenomenon. The cellulose inside the cell walls of plant cells is hydrophilic, that is, it attracts water, due to which water can move from cell to cell. You may have witnessed imbibition during monsoon season. The wooden doors of your room or your cupboard, they swell and it's difficult to open or close them. This is because of imbibition. Imbibition is also responsible for the seeds before germination, absorbing water from the soil, swelling up, breaking the seed coat, allowing the radicle and plumule to grow. The next phenomenon is active transport. Now the root hairs already have a high concentration of minerals inside them compared to the soil. So the minerals have to be forced from a lower concentration to a higher concentration, which is possible only by expenditure of energy in the form of ATP by the root cells. Hence it is called active transport, unlike diffusion, which is passive transport. Active transport is also opposite to diffusion because here the solute particles are moving from a dilute solution to a concentrated solution in the presence of a living semi-permeable membrane, that is a selectively permeable membrane. The next phenomenon is ascent of sap, that is, the water and minerals absorbed by the roots need to be transported to all the parts of the plant via the xylem. And three phenomena help in this process: the root pressure, capillary action, and transpirational pull. The root pressure is developed in the roots because of cell-to-cell osmosis. When a cell absorbs water, it swells and becomes turgid, and then it passes that water to the next cell, and itself it becomes flaccid. This will be explained in detail in a short while. But because of this alternate turgidity and flaccidity, a root pressure is developed, due to which water ascends in the xylem. However, it can reach up to a limited height, so it is useful for short bushes, but not in tall plants. Another phenomenon, capillary action, is not so significant, but it helps in ascent of sap. We have observed capillary action when we see a very thin straw in coffee or in water. We see that some of the water rises inside the capillary. In plants, the xylem vessels act like the capillary, and smaller the diameter, greater is the capillary action. The water rises inside it because of a force called adhesion between the water molecules and the xylem cells, due to which the water climbs up to a certain extent. But the most significant phenomenon helping ascent of sap is undoubtedly transpirational pull. During the day, when stomatal transpiration takes place from the leaves and all the aerial parts of the plant, simultaneously water is absorbed from the roots. A chain is created between the water molecules from the leaves right till the roots because of force of attraction called cohesion. So as more water transpires, an equal amount of water is absorbed by the roots under normal circumstances. Now let's study osmosis in detail. If you take a plant cell, like a root cell, which is in the flaccid state, That is a normal state where the cell membrane is not pressing against the cell wall, and this state is possible when it is surrounded by an isotonic solution. That is, the concentration of the cell sap inside is equal to the concentration of its surroundings. But if you take this cell and keep it in a hypertonic solution, that is a solution which has higher percentage of water, a dilute solution, then there is no equilibrium. In this case, end osmosis will take place. You see, there is a higher concentration of solutes in the vacuoles of this cell. The vacuole is not drawn for simplicity, but they cannot get out because of the semi-permeable membrane, so diffusion is not possible. Because of the semi-permeable membrane, osmosis of water molecules is possible from a dilute solution to a conc solution. That is from lower concentration of solute to higher concentration of solute. This leads to the swelling, the distension of the cell, and such a state is called the turgid state. Osmosis should continue, that is, absorption of water should happen till the time an equilibrium is attained between the internal and external concentrations. But the cell wall is rigid, so the cell won't burst because of the incoming water. So the osmosis will stop once the cell is completely turgid. Turgidity of cells has many applications, which we shall study shortly. But what if the plant cell is kept in a hypertonic solution? In this scenario, the external environment has a very high concentration of solute, that is, lower percentage of water. Again, exosmosis will take place, that is, water molecules will move out of the cell to achieve equilibrium. But this means that the vacuoles will shrink, and hence even the cell membrane will shrink and move away from the cell wall. And this gap between cell wall and cell membrane is covered with the hypertonic solution. If the plant stays in this phase for a long time, it will die. This process is called plasmolysis, and the cell is called plasmolysed cell. This has many applications. For example, bacteria cells, which also have cell walls, may die because of plasmolysis. That is why we gargle with salty water, because salty water is a hypertonic solution, and that is also the reason why we salt pickles and other food items, because a hypertonic environment will lead to the plasmolysis of bacteria cells, which will kill them. Similarly, if you want to kill weeds in the field, then we can apply high concentration salts around the roots of the weed. Such a hypertonic environment will cause plasmolysis of the root hairs, and they will die, and hence even the weed will die. Now, before the cell dies, if this plasmolysed cell is immediately kept in an isotonic solution, then it will become flaccid once again and will survive. As water enters the plant cell because of osmotic pressure, it exerts a turgor pressure on the cell wall, because of which the cell wall distends. The cell wall simultaneously applies an equal and opposite force on the cell contents, which is called wall pressure. Now, because of turgidity, many plant movements happen. First, wilting of leaves. Often we notice that during a hot weather in the afternoon, the leaves of the plants wilt and droop. That is because the rate of transpiration is far higher than the rate of absorption by the roots, due to which there is deficiency of water in the leaf cells. The cells become flaccid and they droop. In the evening, since the rate of transpiration is less, the amount of water in the leaf cells increases, due to which the leaf cells become turgid and they become rigid and erect. The second application is the turgor pressure helping to push through the hard ground. For a seed, when the seed is sown deep inside the soil, they absorb the water and the cells become turgid. And the collective turgidity of all the cells creates enough force to push the plumule out of the soil and push the roots deep inside the soil, which can even crack walls. The third application is root pressure. Now, I have told you that root pressure is one of the phenomena which helps in ascent of sap. Because of the alternate turgidity and flaccidity of the root cells as water passes from one cell to another, a root pressure is generated inside the roots, which helps to push the sap upwards. However, this push against gravity will work only for short shrubs and not for long plants. For long plants, as I've informed you, transpirational pull is the most important phenomenon for ascent of sap. The fourth application is opening and closing of stomata during the day. During daytime, the guard cells on the leaves do photosynthesis, due to which they produce glucose. Their concentration increases, and hence they do endosmosis. The water content inside these cells increases, the cells become turgid, and they become erect. That is, the stomata opens. At night, photosynthesis stops, the concentration inside the guard cells decreases, they lose water because of exosmosis and they become flaccid once again, due to which the guard cells close the stomata. The fifth application is turgor movements in the plants. Plants don't have muscles and bones for any movement. So many of the movements happen because of turgidity. For example, when you touch a mimosa plant, the leaves move because of the change in concentration of water, the cells becoming turgid and flaccid alternately. Another example is the opening and closing of flowers during day or night. Even the movement of insectivorous plants or the bending of sunflower towards the sun is due to turgor movements. Now let's study the direction of the cell-to-cell conduction of water by the roots. First, the soil water is absorbed by the root hair by osmosis. Then it is transferred to the next tissue called epidermis, then the cortex, endodermis, pericycle, and finally a deep tissue named xylem. Now xylem is responsible for the transportation of water to all the parts of the plant. This movement happens because of root pressure. The root cells alternately become flaccid and turgid, pushing the water forward. When the root pressure is very high, for example during early mornings and late evenings, the rate of absorption of water is greater than the rate of transpiration, due to which the plants may have excess water. Certain plants like banana, grass, ferns have leaves with tiny openings or pores at the leaf margins, which are called hydrathodes. They are very different from stomata because stomata have guard cells, but hydrathodes don't. So when there is excess of root pressure and excess of water, it oozes out of these hydrathodes, and hence we can see water droplets on grass blades or on leaves early in the morning. This process is called guttation or exudation. It is very different from transpiration because in transpiration, water is being lost in the form of water vapor, whereas here, water droplets are being released.
10th Standard ICSE Biology, Chapter 4, Absorption by Roots. First page is cancelled, but we need to know the importance of the roots. They help in absorption of water and minerals from the soil, and also they anchor the soil to prevent soil erosion, and for the plants, they anchor the plant into the soil. Section 4.3, Characteristics of roots for absorbing water. They have three characteristics which make them efficient in their job. First, surface area of roots is enormous. They have so many root hair that the total surface area is large. Cancel this. Second, root hairs contain cell sap of a higher concentration than that of the surrounding water. Now in the root, there are large vacuoles in the root hair. It's a single cell here, an epidermal cell. This is an extension of it called the root hair. Here we have cell sap. It has water, minerals, etc. It has high concentration. Comparatively, the soil outside also has minerals and water, and the concentration is low. Concentration of solute, that is. So, typically, substances always are transported from their higher concentration to their lower concentration, automatically, passively. That is called diffusion. For example, here, if you have some dye in one corner of a water beaker, this area has high concentration. Soon diffusion will happen towards the lower concentration areas such that equilibrium is achieved. So this happens naturally. But because there is a semi-permeable membrane, the cell membrane, the pores are too small, so the big salt molecules cannot pass through it. But still equilibrium needs to be achieved. So instead, water will enter inside. Something like this. The solution B, let's assume, is the cell sap solution, which is highly concentrated. Solution A is the neighboring soil, which has low concentration, dilute. You can see that there is a lot of water here. Now salt cannot move from solution B to A because the pores are too small. So instead, water molecules will enter inside because they are small enough to pass through the pores of the semi-permeable membrane. So this is called osmosis. It always takes place from a more dilute solution to less dilute solution. That is, from a dilute solution to a concentrated solution. Or you can say from a higher concentration of water to a lower concentration of water. And it requires a semi-permeable membrane, without which it cannot happen. It does not require any expenditure of energy, so even this is a passive process. So that's how roots are able to absorb water from the soil through osmosis, and thanks to their cell membrane. And that's why the cell sap needs to be maintained at a higher concentration. Then only will osmosis take place. So that was your give reason. However, what if the roots want to absorb the salts as well? Now the concentration of salts is low outside and higher inside. And yet it doesn't want to lose the salt or the minerals or the ions. It in fact wants to absorb the mineral ions. Well, the cell membrane is just not semi-permeable. It's actually selectively permeable. It's a living membrane, which means it can increase the size of the pores whenever it wants to. But to force the salt molecules to travel from the low concentration to their higher concentration, that is against the gradient, requires expenditure of ATP energy, and that's why it's called active transport. So absorption of minerals happens with the process called active transport, where energy is spent to force the potassium ions or the sodium ions or the chloride ions to enter inside, even though the concentration inside is already higher. It's like you're forcing water to go up the pipes of a building. It won't happen naturally. It's against gravity. That requires some machine like a motor. This diagram is double-dipped, so it needs to be practiced. It can come for drawing an exam. Another feature is that root hair have thin cell walls, so that it's not a hurdle for the movement of substances. Cell wall is already freely permeable. Cell membrane is also very thin, and it's semi-permeable, in fact selectively permeable, which is a very important property allowing them to absorb water as well as minerals. Next, there are some phenomena which we'll be studying in this chapter. Absorption and then transportation of water and minerals requires about 6 types of different phenomena. Here we have 7 because the second phenomenon, diffusion, is not at all relevant for this chapter. First of all, imbibition, absorption of water. We'll study each in detail soon. Second is diffusion, which I just explained, but that is not useful in absorption of water or minerals. In fact, diffusion is useful in translocation of food. That is, once it is manufactured in the phloem, it can be transported to any part of the body thanks to diffusion. It is also useful in exchange of gases, respiratory gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide during photosynthesis and respiration. Next, osmosis, that is useful in absorption of water, which I just explained. Active transport, it is useful in absorption of minerals, even that I just explained. Now, 3 new phenomena which are useful in ascent of sap. So the cell sap, which is full of water and minerals, needs to travel upwards in a tree once it is absorbed by the roots. But how can it be pushed up against gravity? Well, there are 3 phenomena. First is root pressure, which is caused due to something called turgidity and flaccidity. But this is useful for only small plants like herbaceous plants. Then we have capillary action, that is ascent of sap is due to this, but it's a very small factor. And the major factor, especially for tall trees, is transpirational pull. So let's understand these phenomena. First, let's start with imbibition. It is a phenomenon by which the living or dead plant cells absorb water by surface attraction. You see, the cell walls are made up of cellulose or some other proteins like lignin. And they are hydrophilic. They have a strong affinity for water. They attract water. So that the root cells, cell wall, absorb water and the water passes along the cell wall. They don't enter inside the cell. They may stay along the cell wall and they may rise up. So that is one way in which water can be transported from cell to cell. It is also useful in germination of seeds. When the seeds absorb water by imbibition, it swells and the seed coat ruptures. This also reminds me how wooden doors swell up during the rainy season. It becomes sometimes difficult to close these wooden doors when the humidity is very high. That's because they have absorbed all the water and they have swollen up. So cancel this word ascent of sap and write absorption of water and in transpiration. In ascent of sap, it is useful, but in very small ways. The major reason why ascent of sap happens are these 3 phenomena, 5, 6, 7. Diffusion, the definition is free movement of anything. It could be solute or solvent, gas, liquid or solid, from higher concentration to their lower concentration. And they should be in direct contact. No semi-permeable membrane in between should be there. Write or out here. Solid also should have been mentioned. But for plant, this is enough definition. Cancel this experiment entirely. Osmosis is a movement of water molecules. Actually, it could be movement of any solvent molecules, but for this chapter, we'll focus on water molecules from their region of higher concentration, and by their means of water, so from water's higher concentration. But I prefer the language from a dilute solution to a concentrated solution. You can even say from a lower solute concentration to a higher solute concentration, or from water's higher concentration to water's lower concentration. Any language is fine. But also mention through a semi-permeable membrane. Next, this is cancelled. Now, if osmosis happens inwards, it is called endosmosis, and if it happens outwards, it's called exosmosis. For example, when a plant cell is kept in an isotonic solution, that means the outside concentration is same as the concentration in the cell sap, then no net osmosis happens. Yeah, movement is happening, but overall there is no osmosis. And the state is called a flaccid state, where the cell membrane and the cell wall is just touching each other. It is not swelling or shrinking. If the cell is kept in a hypertonic solution, that is outside the concentration is very high, say a high sugar solution brine, or salt solution that is brine, or sugar solution, then exosmosis will happen. That is, water will ooze out, because water always moves from a dilute solution to a conc solution. Then the cell membrane and the entire cell shrinks, as you can see. The cell wall remains as it is. So this state or this condition is called plasmolized state. This phenomenon is called plasmolysis, which can lead to death. Now, if the cell is kept in a hypotonic solution, that means the outside concentration is very low compared to the inside concentration, then endosmosis happens. And by the way, this is what happens in the root cells. So you can see that they absorb so much water that they swell in size. The cell membrane is pushing against the cell wall. Such a state is called turgid state, or this phenomenon is called turgidity. The cell won't burst because cell wall is quite rigid. These things happen in animal cells also, by the way, in an isotonic solution, hypertonic solution, hypotonic solution. But here I cannot say plasmolized and turgid, because there is no cell wall here. In fact, they have different terms. Just for your information, this is crenation and this is hemolyzed, where it actually bursts. So here, in the definitions, for less concentrated, just write the word hypertonic, and for more concentrated, write hypertonic. Let's do an experiment. Here, the cellophane paper is plugged on the mouth of this funnel. Cellophane is a semi-permeable membrane. So inside we have sugar solution and outside we have plain water. So which is the higher concentration here? Inside, correct. So what kind of solution is there outside? Hypotonic solution. So you can say that the water in the beaker represents the soil water, and the sugar solution represents the cell sap in the root, and the cellophane paper is a semi-permeable membrane, just like the cell membrane or plasma membrane. So will endosmosis happen or exosmosis will happen? Endosmosis, correct. Water will go inside so that it is more dilute, and outside the water level decreases, so it becomes more concentrated. So they are trying to achieve equilibrium here. So the solution level will start rising. Let's say this is the final level. We can simultaneously do an experiment with another apparatus where the cellophane paper is replaced with some muslin cloth or something. So their diffusion will happen. Or another control could be same setup, but this time in this funnel, don't keep a sugar solution, keep water. Here the water level won't rise because no osmosis will take place, because there is no difference in concentration. So what are the observations? These are the observations. Number one, level of sugar solution rises inside. Level of water in the thistle funnel in the control will remain unchanged. In the beaker, it will fall slightly. And the water in the beaker does not taste sweet, means sugar cannot come out because of the semi-permeable membrane. Only water can come in. So this clearly shows osmosis. Then there are some other versions of the same experiment explained here, but the concept is the same. So instead of cellophane paper, you can use something like a whisking bag, even that is semi-permeable, or even the urinary bladder of some animal, even that is semi-permeable. But if you use a rubber sheet, well, that's impermeable, nothing will happen. Or if you use a muslin cloth, then again, level won't change, it's just that the sugar will go out and make the water sweet. This paragraph is cancelled, but keep the first sentence, whisking bag. This is also cancelled, so repetition. This is cancelled, repetition. But can osmosis keep on continuing till equilibrium is achieved? Not quite. In this same experiment, let's keep a weight on top. Now there will come a weight which will stop the osmosis. Because of the pressure of the weight downwards, it balances the osmotic pressure inwards. So now we know what is osmotic pressure. Cancel this paragraph and the first definition. I'm sure you'd like the smaller definition. Osmotic pressure is the measure of its tendency to take in water by osmosis. Or you can say osmotic pressure is equal to the pressure from above which holds it downwards. Now tonicity. Tonicity is not the city in which Tony Stark stays. It is the relative concentration of the solution. So we have three types of solutions: isotonic, hypotonic and hypertonic. Remember I explained that if it's hypotonic, then endosmosis will take place, and hypertonic, exosmosis will take place. This diagram makes it abundantly clear. Next we move on to active transport, which I've explained. It also requires a cell membrane. It also requires expenditure of energy in the form of ATP, so that ions or salts can move from their lower concentration to their higher concentration. Ions like that of sulfates, potassium, zinc, manganese, etc. They have to move across the concentration gradient. There is a concentration difference forcibly, so it's an active transport. Whereas osmosis and diffusion are passive transport, GR, because here we don't require any energy. It happens naturally. The next topic is turgidity and flaccidity. First paragraph cancelled. Now we know that osmotic pressure causes the water to enter inside, due to which the cell becomes very turgid. The cell membrane exerts a pressure on the cell wall to bulge outwards, to swell up. That state is called turgid state, and the pressure is called turgor pressure. But the cell wall doesn't burst, because to this action there is a reaction called the wall pressure, which equalizes the turgor pressure. This paragraph is cancelled and mark this as a GR. The difference between diffusion, osmosis and active transport. First of all, definitions. Diffusion can happen with anything, liquids, gases and even solids. Water only for osmosis, and for active transport, only ions are transported over a short distance. So please change this point. Here, it's rapid, it's slow, it's rapid. Fifth point is entirely cancelled. Here, no membrane required. Here, a membrane is required. Even here, a membrane is required. And here, it should be a living membrane. Here, it can be living or non-living, either. This paragraph is cancelled, but not the last sentence. Double take this diagram. It shows step by step what's happening. We have a turgid cell full of water. We keep it in a hypertonic solution, so exosmosis takes place. So first of all, it becomes flaccid. This is flaccid. So flaccidity is, you can say, it's the midpoint between turgidity and plasmolysis. Don't confuse flaccidity with plasmolysis. Plasmolysis can lead to death. So as water is going outside now, the cell membrane is no longer pushing against the cell wall. It's shrinking, it's shrunk, and if you don't do something about it, it'll die. You want to save it, immediately keep it in a hypotonic solution. That way, it will absorb water and become flaccid once again. And that process, ladies and gentlemen, is called deplasmolysis. Cancel the word flaccid out here, that's wrong. It's plasmolized is not the same as flaccid. Some definitions: turgidity, plasmolysis, and flaccidity. Flaccidity definition is wrong, change it. It is a condition in which the cell membrane isn't tightly pressed against the cell wall. That is, it's neither turgid nor plasmolized. Now, there are some uses of turgidity to plants. First of all, it provides rigidities to soft tissue such as the leaves. Mark this as a GR and GR. Notice how here the leaves are standing straight, but here the leaves have become flaccid. That is, wilted. So here the leaf cells are getting enough water supply, due to which the cells have become turgid and the leaves have become erect. Here the leaves have wilted because they are not getting enough water supply, so the cells have become flaccid, so they droop. So during a hot afternoon, when the rate of transpiration is much more than the rate of absorption of water, there is deficiency of water in the cells, so they become flaccid and the leaves droop. On the other hand, in the evening, the transpiration is reduced. Now a lot of water is absorbed, and so the leaf cells become turgid again, and the leaves again stand out. Next, plasmolysis in practice. So when you add salt to meat or to pickle, it's to create a hypertonic environment so that the bacteria will die due to plasmolysis. They will lose all their water. That is why pickles last for a very long time, or even jams last for a very long time. Similarly, when you gargle water, you should use salty water to kill all the bacteria in your throat. Even weeds can be killed like this. Just sprinkle some salts around their base. The root cells will get plasmolyzed and die, and the whole plant dies. And that is why too much of fertilizers is bad, because they may damage the roots by plasmolysis of the crop. It also helps the seeds to push through the hard ground. So they absorb water by imbibition and osmosis, and they swell up, and that's how they are able to break through the seed coats and break through the soil layers. This turgidity and flaccidity of cells in the roots, it creates a kind of a root pressure due to which the cell sap moves upwards, which can be measured with the help of a manometer. Here we have cut off the stem and connected it to this manometer. Notice how the mercury is being pushed upwards, proving that there is a root pressure because of flaccidity and turgidity. So the definition: pressure developed in the roots because of continued inward movement of water because of cell-to-cell osmosis, which helps in the ascent of cell sap through the stem. So if you cut a tree somewhere at a bark or something, some cell sap may ooze out, and that is called bleeding. It can happen at any time of the day, and that is also an evidence that there is a root pressure. The Turgor movements also help in closing and opening of stomata. So during the day, the guard cells, they absorb water, that is endosmosis happens, and they become turgid, and they become erect, and they open up the stomata during the day. At night, these guard cells lose water and exosmosis happens. They become flaccid, and they fall down and close the stomata. So it happens naturally. But how does exosmosis and endosmosis take place in guard cells? That we'll study in chapter number 6. Next, Turgor movements. We have 3 examples here. Number 1, the rapid drooping of the leaves of the mimosa plant. It's similar to a touch-me-not plant, where the moment you touch it, the water moves towards other cells and the cells become flaccid, and then it droops. And after some time, these cells will become turgid once again. They will absorb water and it will become erect soon. Similar kind of Turgor movements help in the movement of insectivorous plants parts. They don't have a nervous system or muscles for movement. It's all because of Turgor movements. Cells becoming turgid and flaccid. Even the bending movements of certain flowers towards the sun, or sleep movements of some night plants, is because of Turgor movements. So together, imbibition and Turgor generate a lot of force. Imagine if there is a room filled with seeds and grains, and if the rainwater leaks in, the seeds will absorb all the moisture because of imbibition and endosmosis. The combined pressure is so much that the seed coat will burst. In fact, the walls of the basement go down, which has a lot of food grains in it. The walls of the go down will crack because of the combined pressure of the food grains. Now, root pressure, cancel all this, it's a repetition. This diagram is double-ticked again. It shows the movement of water from the soil to the root hair, then it passes through the cortex, then endodermis, then pericycle, phloem, and finally xylem. And from xylem it moves upwards and is transported to the top parts of the plant. Sometimes the root pressure is so much that the margins of the leaves ooze out water from pores called hydrathodes. This happens in some plants, and this is called guttation. This is different from bleeding because here there is no cut. There were already pores called hydrathodes at the margins of the leaves. And this happens especially in early mornings or late evenings, when the rate of transpiration is low and rate of absorption of water is higher comparatively. So here write and late evenings, and also write one sentence. Root pressure is maximum when the rate of absorption of water is more than the rate of transpiration. Now, importance of absorption of water by the root. Well, only when the water is absorbed will it be transported to all parts of the plant, and along with it even minerals can be transported, which is shown in this. Now let's do some experiments. First of all, in this diagram we can see that we have a control with no plant, and we have a plant out here. Now notice that only in this one is the water level falling, and it is because of absorption of water by the roots. There is oil on top, making sure that there is no evaporation. Next experiment. Here we take eosin solution, red color. Let the plant absorb the solution. Then just cut a cross section and notice that only the xylem part of it is red in color, proving that the xylem absorbs water, not phloem or any other tissue. By the way, xylem and phloem together are called vascular bundles. Phloem helps in transportation of food, and xylem and phloem are found in the veins of the leaves. Let's do one more experiment. Here, remove the outer part of the stem, that is a phloem part. By the way, it's called girdling. Here, remove the central part, which is the xylem part. Notice that here the leaves remain erect because they are getting their water supply because xylem is intact. Here, the leaves droop because they are not getting their water because xylem is gone. This clearly shows again that xylem absorbs water, not phloem. By the way, in the end, both will die because here the lower part is not getting the food prepared by the leaves, so it will die of starvation. And here, without water, the leaves will die and photosynthesis will stop and the whole plant will die in the end. Now, there is one precaution here, mark it as a precaution. Cut the plant at the bottom, we cut it underwater. Don't cut it in air and then insert it in water. First introduce it in water and then cut the bottom plant. This way there is no air bubble introduced into the xylem because air bubbles may obstruct the flow of water. This girdling method is used to kill trees. If there is a huge tree and you can't really cut it down, then just remove the phloem part of it. Slowly the food will be accumulated on top of it because it cannot go downwards. The roots will die of starvation and then the whole plant will die. Next, the forces contributing to ascent of sap. There are three main forces, not four. Number one, root pressure. As I've explained, the alternate turgidity and flaccidity of the cells in the roots create a root pressure, but that is not enough for the water to rise up to tall trees top. It's enough for small plants. There is another phenomenon, capillarity, which is not a major force, but it does help. It happens in xylem vessels. If a straw is very, very thin, extremely thin in water, you will notice that the water rises up a little bit on its own automatically. This is because of something called capillarity. You see, due to surface tension and adhesion, there is an attraction between water and xylem cells, the water starts climbing up. It gets stuck to the xylem cells and starts climbing up. And this is called capillarity force. But even this is not enough. The main thing which helps in ascent of sap is transpirational pull. So as transpiration happens through the leaves, this creates a chain reaction. So more water is absorbed by the roots because all the water molecules are attached to each other with the help of cohesion forces. So remember, adhesion is attraction between water and the xylem, but cohesion is the attraction between water and water. They form a chain, and from here the chain is pulled up, and even from here the chain is pulled in. This is called transpirational pull, which helps in ascent of sap, not only for water but even the minerals dissolved in it. What if there is a downward movement of sap required? Well, that's easy. Gravity. Cancel this.
Hi students, this is AJ sir. If you like this video, press the like button. If you would like to enroll for my online test series or online lectures, email me or message me on Instagram. Check the description for more information.